I am very excited to introduce to you two profound award-winning innovators, gurus in their field of expertise, and exceptional storytellers, the director and producer of The Art of Weightlessness, and Moshe Mahler, and producer and key cast at heart of the film, Bill Shannon. Welcome, Mo and Bill. I am truly honored to be speaking to the both of you. And I'm thinking that before we start talking about the film, that we could begin with introducing yourselves. And I'm wondering if the both of you could speak a bit about your background and journey in your fields of work before meeting one another for this film. Let's start with Mo.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mo Mahler. I'm the director of the film, The Art of Weightlessness. My background is in fine art and animation and in tech art, and I've really spent my career working in research and working with research scientists. Worked for Disney Research, for example, for a long time. But I've always kind of straddled the worlds of industry and production and research and art. So I've always kind of held all of those things of equal value. So I might, one year be working on publishing research, but on the next year be working on a film. So I've made several films over my career, and this last one was the culmination of about 6 years of work.
Yeah, my name is Bill Shannon. I'm an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary artist, meaning that my work is conceptually driven primarily, and from those ideas, I take different directions in media. So I'm always trying to learn new approaches, new media forms, and bringing them together to express these various concepts in the best way that I know how. I also happen to dance on crutches. I think that as evolving as an artist, the use of the crutches became kind of very high profile in a public way, and so that's primarily what I'm known for, like the sort of virtuosic technical expertise based on a lifetime of being on crutches. And so that work kind of coexists with my work as an artist, that kind of encapsulates and contextualizes that dance and that technique and different ways, different strategies of doing that.
So let's begin talking about The Art of Weightlessness by how did this film begin, and how did you meet, and why did the both of you say yes to one another?
So we met at Carnegie Mellon. This was maybe over 7 years ago at this point. And Bill was doing a residency at Carnegie Mellon through the Studio of Creative Inquiry, and a School of Art professor connected the two of us. Golan Levin connected us because Bill was interested in using motion capture to document his movement style for the prosperity of the movement style. And I saw Bill's body of work and was, kind of inspired and infatuated with it, and kind of responded like, yeah, I'd love to help you, but maybe we want to work on, I'd love to maybe make something with you as well, or collaborate with you. And so we kind of got together and, had coffee, and I had a few ideas. And when I heard his story, I was like, okay, well, maybe that's what we should make. And it became a good excuse to get some of that motion capture data.
Bill, would you agree with Mo about that? And can you speak a little bit about the motion capture thing that made you want to be interested in that?
Well, I was at the Studio for Creative Inquiry doing a residency as part of a national dance project. performance work that I was planning on touring, and I did tour. And that work was called Touch Update, and it was a multidisciplinary live performance and also wearable video sculpture piece. And so while I was at the Studio for Creative Inquiry, I was actually in the process of fabricating and designing with a hardware coding guy um, a wearable video mask. And as a part of that process, we had discussed various like things that were possible at CMU, and I had always been very interested in sort of haptics and movement patterns and the politics of that, like how dancers were having their, in Fortnite, for example, dancers were having their signature like movements taken by this company and then used with absolutely zero credit, no financial, nothing, no money and no credit for these people who had created. So there was a court case at that time where this one dancer kind of like tried to sue them um, based on his particular sequence of movements, but it was kind of a weak case because he didn't have a really clear historical like um, representation of those specific moves. And so I was like, well, my moves are very individual. And if I mocap my moves and have them as basically as a library of different sequences of moves, then it's a way to sort of say, if you want to use this pattern of movement in this increasingly meta world, right? So all of a sudden, like physical movement by humans becomes more valuable and also becomes almost like proprietary to that human. And the politics around that and around disability too, and the disability politic around like a person with a physical disability creating an entirely unique movement form and existing in an able-bodied dominated dance world and then trying to kind of navigate that process of intellectual property and I'm not into copyright. Like I'm all about like common, common and sharing, whatever. I forget what it's called. It's called common. What's it
Common
called?
good.
Common good. Well, no, there's a way to copyright general usage for the public. There's a
Like
specific.
open source, something
Oh,
like that.
yeah, it's not called open source either. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, I just wanted to kind of isolate those. And I saw Mo's work. I was like, whoa, this is like he's at Disney. This is like the real deal. This is not, this is like official. Like there's I don't know where you go after Disney. I mean, what do you Studio Ghibli, I guess. I mean, it's really like it's the height of kind of the skill that it takes to even get in that room, so I was very impressed. And so I thought, well, this is it. This is an opportunity to record the movement. And then became the physical process of actually doing it, which is a whole other, kind of process, a whole other challenge, really, like really challenging to do effectively. But that's another conversation. So I know I tend to talk. So if you want, just cut me off. Just say, Bill, you've talked enough. Let's keep going here.
No, I
Yeah,
actually I thought it was actually very interesting as I did read about how you spoke about one of the important things for you was that you were able to motion capture your moves that you actually um, created yourself. It's your work. It's individualized. It's special. It's different. No one else has ever done that. I mean, I'm wondering, Mo, was that one of the reasons why also that you were interested in um, telling Bill's story is because of the innovation of his moves?
yeah, I think it's one of these stories. It's not even one in a million, right? It's uh, the circumstances of Bill's story are really interesting in terms of not only did he have to be diagnosed with this, but then have a period in his life where he was more free to move around as well, and became involved in breakdancing and skateboarding, which were really formative. And then to kind of be told again in his later or younger adulthood that you have to use crutches again, that order of events was really important to Bill, to who Bill is and his evolution, right? Um, so not only that, but there's a certain athleticism
Mhm.
that this takes as well. And then even more so, maybe the most the biggest kind of anomaly of it all is his artistic and creative presence introduced into that circumstance. So it's really a kind of a wild chain of events for this to actually culminate in in his artistic style. So
At the beginning of the film, I was thinking there was a moment that Bill said, when I loved it when he says that when he was told by the doctor that, okay, you're going to have to walk with crutches, you're not going to be able to walk without them. And Bill's attitude was very different, I think, from what my expectations would be if I was told that I had to, use crutches. Um, I think Bill sort of came out and said, okay, well, okay, this is what I'm going to do. What am I going to do with it? Like, just let's move on. And I felt that this moment in the film was making a point about overcoming adversity, and that it was, oh no, it was making a point about not saying that it's about overcoming adversity, but that it was actually something else. And I'm wondering if either of you could expand on that thought. To some extent, I guess I'm asking, what is the message of this film?
I want to connect these things. First of all, what Mo was talking about with sort of the unique sort of timeline. And within disability studies, there's a concept called disability continuum. And disability continuum is the idea that in different stages of your life, you are more or less disabled. And so, old age, obviously, you become elderly, you become more disabled when you're a child, So this type of concept of my disability continuum was extremely unique and kind of ambiguous at the same time. And I just wanted to connect that um, with what you had brought up. And I'm losing my train of thought here, where you had said something about what I said what did I say again?
Basically, when you were told you had to use crutches to walk, you
Oh, right.
kind of
Okay.
went and
I
said,
got it.
okay,
Okay.
let's go.
Sorry. The childhood, I knew I wanted to say something about this. It's
Mhm.
the significance of childhood onset versus adulthood onset of disability. When you are a child and you become physically disabled, or and I, as a child, didn't even feel like I was just told.
Mhm.
Like when I stood up and walked on my hip, it didn't hurt. It didn't stop me. It wasn't like that. It was literally a psychological thing. I had to say, I'm disabled. Okay, I'm disabled, But that childhood onset really does have a different set of psychological parameters than adulthood onset because, number one, you don't have a lot of life experience, but also that the life experience of someone who has an able-bodied experience for their into their adulthood and then becomes disabled in their adulthood, there's a much different gut level, like, oh wow, now you know what I'm saying? And so there's a big gap there. So that's really important to understanding the sort of notion of play. And I think even my brother, what one thing I love about the animation is that it does include the fact that my brother wanted a pair too.
I love that
He
point.
was 2 years younger than me, and he wanted crutches too. Like that they were that cool. And that kids can look at that in that way, and you see that, in young people and all the time.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Mo, like, did you place that scene on purpose? 'Cause I actually thought it was a wonderful scene as well, where we were talking about Bill, but then all of a sudden you put in this nuance with his brother saying, "Hey, I want a set of crutches as well." Like, what were you trying to say when you added that, like, or you included that in your film?
yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a traditional documentary in the way that we filmed a bunch of footage and then cut it together. So there was some intention of in the way, the order in which the story is told. And that moment is important in the story because I think we can learn a lot from that kind of childhood outlook on life. And if you hear Bill talk about his story, it wasn't a matter of trying to overcome adversity. It was just trying to be a kid and keep up with his brother, or just kind of like do normal things and have fun, right? And it's that the repetition of doing those things that built all this expertise on the crutches, right? So that was really important to me. And so I come from this background of storytelling. At Disney, the storytellers there really try to come up with the kind of one line, what is this story about, right? And that becomes kind of a beacon for the project. And so for this project, early on, it became about this evolution through his circumstance, which is different than overcoming adversity, right? Because there might not be a chance to overcome all adversity we face, right? We hear that kind of cliche throughout society of like, oh, overcoming adversity, but sometimes you can't overcome certain things, right? But we all have to evolve over our lifetime, and Bill had this really tangible evolution that resulted in such like beautiful visual output that I think that's what makes it a story that I wanted to work on Bill with.
I wanted to get into the idea of language around disabilities. I think that that's actually a big problem within our society. And I think I mentioned earlier about what I felt is most impactful in the film is that the big take on your film is that it's challenging the audience or basically society's viewpoint, which I feel isn't very accurate when it comes to speaking about disability. I found that the film was so profound and so joyful because having worked for some years with children who have extreme physical challenges, I feel that the language, attitudes, and assumptions around disability is very problematic. Was this the intention of your film to have such an impact?
You want to start, Bill?
I mean, I can talk for an hour about
Right.
linguistics and disability but as far as the documentary is concerned, I mean, there is a specific language that I come with that I'm like, Mo, if we're gonna do this, it can't be this, and it can't be like it's like a laundry list of like things it can't be, and it makes it hard. It makes it seem like oh, you're hard to work with, or you're being pushy and bossy and demanding, and it's like, no, I've just been around the block so many times with these type of mistakes and these type of like ways of talking about things and contextualizing things. I'm not going to be a part of it if we can't agree to this before even the first record button is pressed. Like, forget it, it's not going to work.
Can you give me an example of what was definitely a no-no for you?
I mean, just the general tone, I think, is, like, let's say, you have I had two, like a review from the New York Times. Okay. The review was positive. It was a great review of the show, but the title of it was Hip was bad, but the hop was sensational, right? So it kind of like made this like type of like title for the thing. And it's just kind of like that kind of like, we're gonna make a joke about it, or we're gonna have something cute about it, or and that's kind of a common way for people. Oh, I need to disarm it somehow. Let's disarm it by doing this. Like there's some predetermined or sort of like self-conscious need to like address it in this almost like a shallow way. So that kind of thing is problematic. Focusing way too much on the details of the actual medical, like all the medical stuff that comes with it. in my work around semantics around my live performance in public space is the idea of medical validation, the idea that until I explain to you exactly what the details of the disability are, you're not going to really believe or understand or care about what else is happening. Like, you need that confirmation, you need medical validation to appreciate creative presence. You know what I'm saying? So I would go out on stage and I would start performing and I'd see people like looking through the program trying to find out what was wrong with me. You know what I'm saying? Instead of appreciating the work. So then I started coming out and doing a whole like, okay, this is my technique on crutches, this is why, and kind of doing a sort of like navigating the need for medical validation in live audience before actually presenting the show. So I made a pre-show just to like get pushed all that bullshit to the side so that I could start on neutral on what most people, able-bodied people, start out with when they hit the stage. You know what I'm saying? So there's this whole like, you can't imagine like a character, let's say a character in a movie or a film, right? And you're watching the film and they're on crutches, but they don't tell you why they're on crutches. You don't know why, and they're just on them. Like, that's not, for people, it's not necessarily something they can absorb. So they need that kind of thing. So, I didn't want to go through a big medical validation. I wanted it to be really short and quick. So and there's a lot of other things that it's really kind of boring actually. But Mo, if you want to have anything to add to that.
Yeah, wanted to know, Mo, like, how did you feel about all of all of Bill's criteria?
Uh, Bill was really easy to work with, actually. The process was pretty natural, and because we did record a lot of footage of him kind of telling the story, it was never me writing a script and putting words in Bill's mouth. It was me finding the way I wanted to tell his story and cutting it down to the 9-minute film it is. So that was pretty easy to work with because Bill is not only a natural storyteller, a professional storyteller who's told this story a lot, right? So there was a lot of good um, footage and audio samples to choose from there. Speaking more to the first part of the question around disability, I mean, the reason why I was attracted to the story is that, I mean, we all have something in our life. So I think it speaks even beyond the disability community because we're all facing something. And latching onto the message of evolving through it, because I think at the end of the day, that's what a lot of life is things don't go our way all the time. Life is not easy, and one way of facing that is life is hard, but there's also this evolution that you go through over your lifetime that I think a lot of people can resonate with.
So, Bill, I'm wondering, how did you feel about working with Mo in terms of the criteria that you had put forth? Did you feel that he was very receptive to what you were saying?
Well, like you said, I mean, we recorded like storytelling, we recorded live the stories that I told and what I had to say, and he used that as his primary material. So, it was more like a really short discussion over coffee about like, okay, look, I don't really want to do a kind of like, how amazing it is to overcome type of thing. I don't want to dwell on like Perthes disease and what Perthes disease is and all that stuff. I didn't want to dwell on any of that.
Right.
So, that was a brief conversation. And then we went into recording and I was able to talk about the different influences of, the cultural influences on my work and the creative energy of my, work as an artist, which, kind of took on its own presence in the film. So, I was happy with it. And the other thing is, there is a feature-length documentary
Hmm.
on my work. It's on Apple TV. It's on Discovery Plus. It's called Crutch, Crutch. That's the title of it. I think it came out about 6 years ago. It's toured all around and there's a lot of exposure. And one of the things that was missing, we had talked about it, was the evolution of the actual physical crutches, the first freestyle crutch that is in this film,
Yeah,
which I really appreciate. And we had actually approached Mo before even doing this short that I did with Mo. I had approached Mo like, hey, can you do some visuals of like the different crutches, the single point, the single point with the peg, the double handled single point, antique single point, shock absorbing rocker bottom, aluminum rocker bottom, chrome rocker bottoms, all of the different evolution of crutches through my work. And can you make those animations? And we went back and forth, but the film crutch is so jam-packed full of content that they really like it's like a the whole film is very kind of paced in such a way that there wasn't a whole lot of room to add a lot more without kind of making it longer than what
Right.
the documentary time format is. It's like
yeah,
90 minutes or 92 minutes, but it can't be 102 minutes. And it's just like
yeah,
ridiculous, like these,
yeah.
I don't know, random things that people follow for some reason. And being the artist that I am, I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But that's what it is. So that wasn't included. So bringing that into this was really cool and really fun to see happen. And I really appreciate it because the fabricating along the path with testing the things physically and then making the things to like address what happened, what broke, and then make it again. And it's a back and forth conversation between physical design and metal fabrication, and then like physical dance and like breaking things. So that was fun to get in there for
And
sure.
I think that helped us find the soul of the piece too that we made, because going into it and making it kind of about the crutches led us to this evolutionary aspect. And then as the director, I wanted to reinforce those ideas. So there's these kind of uh, construction montages of crutches and all the different types of crutches and his skateboard and his anatomy and things like that, that kind of echo or rhyme off each other. And then, you know, we tell that story in other ways too, like through the soundtrack. There's a drum piece that really inspired the soundtrack. Actually, there's a piece by the John Coltrane Quartet called "A Drum Thing," which is like a 7-minute piece of jazz, which just gets more and more complex as the track goes on. It's a great listen, if you want to look it up. But that really inspired the art direction of the piece. So as the piece develops, it gets visually more complex. The music gets more complex. Bill's dancing and his mastery of the crutches becomes more complex as well.
Yeah, I actually I noticed that. Like I really felt that the beginning of the film started with just simple little beats and it started to escalate into more, especially when Bill would be dancing. And then when he was off his crutches, it sort of slowed down a little bit again, and then it elevated again until like pretty much till the end of the film. That's sort of the sense I got. And so I guess that was something that you thought of for sure in terms of another layer for the film. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as an animator, I started off as like a painter drawer and a draftsman and just being expressive with like the mediums, right? But as an animator, you kind of train yourself to be really controlling and really intentional and to think everything through and make everything first and then make it again and then make it again and this iterative kind of design process. So the all those themes were carefully chosen.
How successful do you feel in terms of putting off your message about not saying this film is about overcoming adversity, but that it is about the evolution? How do you feel about what you've put forth? Do you feel like you were successful in doing that?
I just want to say something. I mean, I feel like um that messaging, like trying to get like this literal messaging, is not something I engage in. I engage in manifesting or sort of being the message, but not actually like, okay, so, we're not going to be, like, it's just not it's not like uh, I don't know. I guess I grew up like doing like political performance poetry in the 90s, right? And I realized at one point that I'm actually saying all this stuff about, being against the Iraq war to everybody in this room who's against the Iraq war. Like there was like nobody there who didn't agree with me already. So then I realized that using words was not really where the true power was, like the true energy. The true energy was in presence. And so I started going to like pro-war demonstrations and manifesting what it means to be pro-war at such a degree that the people who were pro-war were like, I'm pro-war, but I'm not like that pro-war. And so then it became like I switched channels. And I feel like in my work generally, like I have, I grew up with activist parents. I grew up with parents who were very like, let's set an agenda. Let's, go organize the steelworkers to, go on strike to get, that's the kind of childhood I had. And one of the things I realized is again, it's like just being it rather than saying it. So I think that the piece, kind of manifest that ethos without getting preachy, which is hard to do. And I'm, very happy with how it came out, that it wasn't so over the, hit you over the head, like, this isn't a triumph over adversity story, like,
Right.
don't look at this film that way. It's like, no, that's not even in the cards. It's not even relevant. We're not even on that page anymore. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, my advice to maybe younger filmmakers is it's hard. It's a tricky spot to work backwards from like here's going to be the moral of the story, and I'm going to design the story around this moral, and everyone's going to come away with this moral, and everyone's going to be a better person because of this story. That's not really how I approach filmmaking. Like I said, that one line that becomes a beacon, evolution through circumstance. That's not a moral, right? That's like what the piece is about, and for people can synthesize in the story that line however they want and relate to it however they want, and I think that's where you try to hit the sweet spot, because if you work backwards from the moral, that often feels just like you're pandering to an audience, and maybe that's kind of what, I don't know, Bill and I have different ways of expressing things, but maybe that's my way of saying
I feel like it's almost like didactic. Like, okay, so there's the people who are like, you can make it and you can do it, and all you have to do is try, and we can overcome adversity, and we can.
right.
So that's one end of the spectrum, right? And but the didactic other end of that is like, we're not an overcoming person. We're not, So at the end of the day, like I don't even want to be on the other end of the spectrum. I want to be a completely different universe. So I'm not even speaking that language, period. Like just no comma, exclamation, whatever you want to say. I'm just not, we're not on the same book, you know?
And
So,
it can be unfair, I think, to people too, because no one's circumstances are the same, right? So
Yeah, I think that one of the things I really appreciated about the film is that it really didn't feel like it was pandering to anything. It was speaking about a very important story, I felt, but I also felt that it was actually emphasizing the innovation of what you can do if you put your mind to something, your creative mind towards something, to build something really beautiful, really wonderful, and that actually can elicit emotions from other people, whether it could be anger, sadness, or happiness. But I felt a lot of joy when I was actually watching the film, because I loved watching Bill's moves. I loved the fact that there was somebody named Bill Shannon existing in this world, this incredible innovator. And I appreciated Mo so very much for the fact of his like technical ability to bring this story together in its simplicity, and also in its heartfelt truth to it. So I guess Mo, can you just tell me how you feel about your film? How do you feel about the film, and how it's come out?
uh well,
Are you satisfied?
sure. I took my time with it. And this was a passion project, which was, on the one end, that's great because then you have the full creative control. But you also want to finish the film. So it took me 6 years to finish it. So I took my time because maybe the previous film I made, I was like, I'm going to try to make a film in a year. And I was happy with that result, but it feels like I made a film in a year, with like not very much budget and those kinds of things. So there's always, I think as an artist and creator, there's always things you want to fix and wish you could spend more time on it. But this one I did take my time and was happy with how it turned out. So I'm grateful that it's done well and people appreciate it for sure.
And Bill, how do you feel about being part of this project then? Any regrets or happy?
No,
Or
I
something
really
in
am
between?
happy. I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? Like I really do feel like it's, concise and very well, technically extremely well done. The story is tight. Everything worked on it in such a way that, I don't really have any complaints about it. The hardest thing for me was, you know, velcroing little ping pong balls to my entire body and then trying to thread myself through crutches. So it actually, when I look at the motion capture, I realize that I'm stiffer than I normally am because I'm trying not to knock off these little ping pong balls that are stuck all over my body while I'm dancing on the crutches, because the crutches will immediately knock them off. So I think that the one thing that I would change would be to try to get a more naturalistic performance, because part of a dance really is about not being there mentally, just releasing into like a transparent sort of movement state without thinking is the ideal state. The music is driving you. You're on a different plane of existence. You are no longer consciously thinking, am I going to knock the ping pong off my arm? The ping pong ball off my arm. And if I am thinking about knocking a ping pong ball off my arm, I am not expressing the fluidity, the truth, the deeper, like spiritual, radiant presence of like the dance as something older than me. You know what I'm saying? And
It's
that's
the
really
last
hard. Yeah, it's a
25
hard place
years
to
of
get to. Yeah, it's a hard.
technological innovation in filmmaking, right? Is all these virtual production techniques we're always trying to overcome, like
Yeah,
getting between the performance and the technology can get in the way for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And I only noticed that like the third or fourth time I watched it. Like the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah. Second time, third time, and then I'm like started to notice like certain things where I was just a little bit more conservative and kind of controlled, and like, missing those little finite sort of, things that I would, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
no one knows but me because it's
yeah,
my invention. Nobody else does this.
Right.
So how would anybody know what a hard move is and what an easy? There's no relativity.
yeah.
So because of that, it's invisible to everyone else. But if I were to share that with you, to tell you I was nervous about knocking a ping pong ball off my arm for the whole entire process.
I actually did think about how important it was for your actions to be motion captured because um, what if you're not here anymore, right? I was thinking there should be a school where you should be teaching this sort of stuff.
I've taught Shannon technique to multiple performers, and they have gone on to share those techniques with others. Uh, you know, um, in the documentary, there's a in the documentary Crutch, that is like the live documentary, the feature length one. It's there's a section in there with people that I've taught, Claire Cunningham and Durgan Tokmak, and multiple other people who I've taught who are dancers who actually use crutches because they actually have a disability. So
Mm.
um, so that's happened, and it's still happening. And it's like taking on, like, okay, there's a little bit of World of Circus involved because I did work for Cirque du Soleil, and Cirque du Soleil has like a character on crutches who performs Shannon technique, and it tours around, that kind of thing. And so yeah, it has a life of its own. If I kick the bucket tomorrow, then Mo will have a $1 million data content. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I have the data too. Passed it on to me, so I have that hard drive of my haptic. Is that what it's called, right? Haptic existence, or is that what?
No, it's just the marker info. It's the mocap information. So it's like
Okay,
skeletal, call it
right.
skeletal and marker data, maybe.
So my skeleton lives on long after it becomes dust.
Thank you, Mo.
Well, thanks
Okay,
for
so
taking care of my skeleton.
I'm going to end with two quotes that I think are very poignant from the both of you. Bill's is, my greatest inspiration is finding answers. It's my guiding force. And Mo's is, animation is a medium of limitless control down to the last pixel or stroke. This media is not bound by the physical world or the constraints of feasibility. I wonder if both of you could have your final words about those quotes of yours and what they mean to you.
Searching for answers as an artist means that you never are at a loss for something to work on. You know what I mean? Like, I think that when I say that, searching for an answer, it's on so many different layers, technically, trying to solve creative issues, trying to solve personal issues, trying to solve sociological, psychological, spiritual, all those things, all of that comes into play. And, dancing is an extremely old art form. It's older than drawing, because dancing was used by animals, like literally birds danced, and then we evolved, or at least that's what I believe, that we evolved and from the animal kingdom, and that the animal kingdom also danced, and that, so that answer of like getting that move and getting that expression is infinite. It's an infinite process. Yeah.
And Mo?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is, animation is this incredible medium, right? And a lot of the way we see animation today is more of a genre, and it's not a genre, it's a medium, and it's capable of kind of telling any kind of story in any kind of way, right? And so I think, I'd love to see more exploration in the world of animation and its power to tell all these different types of stories in different ways. So that's what I aspire to do.
One last question. It could be both to the both of you. The final shot of the film, The Art of Weightlessness, is a picture of Bill superimposed on top of Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. What are your thoughts on that? And I guess why choose that?
It's actually from a photograph. I performed at the Cleveland Performance Art Festival in like 1994, I think. And there was a photographer there shooting me on the street performing from like the fifth floor of a building. And at one point, I was coming around and I was circling around, and I noticed this pattern painted on the ground. And I did this whole collapse into it, and then kind of spread my crutches out and my arms and my legs so that it would kind of interact with what was on the painted on the ground, which was the Leonardo thing. So I did that, and he took a photo of it, and that's where that came from.
Wow.
I wanted to, from me, I wanted to include real photos of Bill at the end to show that this is a real person, like this is a real story, and that was a good one to close on in particular because I'm a big fan of Da Vinci because he was not, was he an artist? He was partly artist, partly just a curious person who got into math and invention and all this. And I think the more we can blur those lines, the better. And he was just this guy who worked on what he wanted to work on, and I admire that.